I think that's the majority are now here, and just to remind you that we are live streaming. So welcome to this meeting of the Audit Committee. Are there any apologies?
No, convener. All members are present.
There are no apologies. Are there any declarations of interest? There are none. Thank you. Turning to item 3, the minutes of the Audit Committee of the 23rd of August 2021. Are you happy that this is a true reflection of the meeting? Agreed. Does anyone have any matters arising from these minutes? I have one item on page 5, the penultimate paragraph, where at the meeting we members had asked about the overspend in children's services, mainly due to the increased costs of providing external residential care, and we asked what the impact of this would be on the anticipated savings for 2021-22. The representative from Children's Services was not able to give us an answer at the meeting, and I believe we're still waiting on a response to that query. Gary?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, just to say that a paper on the Council of the Future Closer to Home was taken to the Education, Children and Young People Executive just last week, and I'm happy to share with the Audit Committee that paper. The paper outlines the challenges that were faced in terms of closer to home within the COVID situation, and it also aligns part of that paper with the question I think that was asked. It clearly aligns the savings that are built into the medium-term financial plan, circa 4.7 million, and it realigns some of the savings over a 7-year period that was agreed. So without going into the detail of it, I'm happy to share that paper with you, Chair, because it confirms the answer to your question in terms of the challenges that were raised and the realignment of the savings over a 7-year period, and it clearly defines how the savings were made. And Appendix 1 of that report details how the savings were made over those periods.
Thanks, Gary. Can I ask if members are happy with that response? Agreed. Thank you. Moving on to item 4, and that's the Internal Audit Progress Report. And Isabel will present that to us. Thanks, Isabel.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Morning, everybody. The purpose of the report is to provide an update on progress with completing our 21-22 internal audit plan. It sets out the outcomes of the 2 assignments from the 2021 internal audit plan that were highlighted as currently in progress at the June Audit Committee. At paragraphs 3.1 and 3.2 in section 3, you'll see that the work in relation to both of these reviews has been completed, with the Falkirk Integration Joint Board Risk Management Review at draft report stage and a final report issued for the School Holiday Food Fund grant. Details on the scope and the findings arising from both are at Appendix 1. The assurance for the School Holiday Food Fund grants is provided in line with the definitions at Appendix 2. The plan agreed by committee in April of this year comprised 22 assignment areas. That's a total of 25 reviews to be completed by the team during the year. Paragraph 3.4 highlights that to date, 1 assignment has been completed to final report stage. That's an other client piece of work at Strathcarron Hospice. 2 assignments are at draft report stage, and they were part of our committed assignments from April to September, and 11 assignments are in progress. This includes 2 pieces of other client work too, which is broadly on track at this stage. A summary of progress is set out at Appendix 3. To finish, I'd ask members to note that the recommendations and conclusions that is that the team are making good progress with the 21-22 internal audit work. Paragraph 3.5, however, draws your attention to the appointment of the internal audit risk and corporate fraud manager, having resulted in a vacancy in the internal audit team. Therefore, there may still be impact on the delivery of the plan. The plan, therefore, needs to be considered flexible. I'll keep the committee updated as the recruitment process progresses. If you've got any questions, I'll do my best to try and answer them. Thank you.
Thanks, Isabel, and it's nice to see that you're keeping the ship on course and on time, despite the fact that you are down one. And just in that regard, maybe a question for Brian Smail. Just where are we with the recruitment process for the vacant post at the present time?
Convener, I'm discussing with Isabel at the moment the configuration of the section going forward. In those circumstances, it's opportunity just to take stock and review the mix and grades of staff in the section. So we've exchanged a couple of options on that, and we're looking to crystallise what we think is the best way going forward. So I'm pretty confident on the back of that things will move forward. A provisional business case has been prepared, and we just need to get that into place. So it's in hand.
Do we have an idea of timescale for that?
I think it's just the normal inherent time frame, you know, from the point where you have approval to go to advertisement, you get the advertisement out, you have a period within which applications can be made, then you have interviews to set up, and then, assuming it's an external candidate, notice periods before they go. So inherently, it takes several months before you're likely to have somebody in place.
Okay, just the post has been vacant since January, and we're now 9 months down the line. So I'm conscious that the internal audit team are working very hard and managing to keep up with their timetable, but it must be putting extra pressure on them. Just an observation, it does seem to be quite a while getting this post filled. Okay, I'll open up to members now, and I think Alan was first up, but whether we go ladies first.
I'm happy for Alison to go first.
Thanks, Alan. Okay, Alison.
Just relating to your question, Convener, and it was regarding the length of time that it's taken for the post to be, to be filled. And I know that in the IJB, when we were looking for a senior person to work in the alcohol and drug partnership, it's taken a long time. I mean, I couldn't say for definite, but probably over a year for HR to agree the terms of pay and conditions, because sometimes in this council we look at the pay grade as being working out as how many members of staff that you have on a team, rather than some other councils work on professional competence. I can't even say that, but professional capabilities. So I just wonder if we've maybe got a wee bit of work to do in terms of that, and maybe that's why it's been held up.
Convener, if I can maybe just interject there. The issue is not anything to do with HR. It's just within between myself and Isabel, just reviewing the configuration, as I say, of the internal audit team. I take the point of drift, and on the back of this meeting, we will undertake to nail things and move them forward.
Thank you, Brian. Anything further, Alison? Councillor Alan Nimmo, Alan.
Yeah, thanks, Nigel. Just on the back of what you were saying yourself earlier on, convener, and also what Brian was saying, just obviously that was in relation to the recruitment side of things. I'm conscious, obviously there's been a possible severe impact in relation to COVID, and I'm just wondering what the implications on the internal audit team has been in relation to COVID.
I think one thing I'd like to say is that although there's been a vacancy since January, that was myself and my colleague covered the manager job, and so although we weren't sure at that point what the appointment was going to look like for the manager's job, so we at that point coming into the April audit committee made a reduction in the plan, partly because of COVID and partly because we were in this transitional stage because we didn't know what this year was going to look like. So the plan was slightly reduced to take into account the fact that there was going to be a new manager appointed. Obviously that was me, and that has then had a knock-on impact since April. It's not that we've not been doing anything about it, it's just that we have been looking at the structure and the wider structure, is what Brian was saying. We are getting to that point, yes, where various things are impacting, and yeah, the team are working really hard, keeping up with the plan that we've got. And you will see from what you've got in front of you, we are managing to do that. We are keeping up with it. But Councillor Nimmer, part of your point there about COVID, yes, there's definitely been impacts. We've still got ongoing work that we're trying to cover in terms of the various pieces of following the pandemic pound work that we've got there. But we took that into account at the beginning of the year, and it is just a matter of looking at the plan on a constant basis and just trying to be a bit reactive and flexible to it. So all being well, we're where we should be in terms of what we've got, because we committed assignments up until September, and then we've got another set of assignments from October onwards.
Okay, thanks for that update, Isabel. Thanks, convener.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any other member like to come in? Any question? If not, can I just ask Isabel, just looking at Appendix 1 on page 16, on the school holiday food fund grants. Can I just ask Isabel, how did you arrive at the sample size that you chose for the grant applications?
If I remember, yeah, it was 12. So there were 31 grants in total, and we looked at 12. What we try to do when we're picking samples is we try to get a breadth over the time frame, the values, and in this case, the organisations. So the school holiday fund was over 3 different periods. And if I remember rightly, we picked a sample. Yeah, we had 5 from October applications, 4 from December applications, and 3 from February 21 applications. So it's trying to pick a breadth of organisations and values, and I think the values were somewhere around half of the entire content of the scheme. So it was, you're always trying to get a balance, basically, between all the various bits and pieces so that you're getting a good selection.
Thanks, Isabel. Just the comment that the non-conformance of the written guidance, I mean, this is a little significant and somewhat troubling. So why is it the case that they weren't conforming to what should have been fairly clear guidelines about what information was required and how to set it out? And what are we going to do about that in the future to ensure conformity?
It's probably that's probably one for the service more, but the non-conformance issues. This was a new scheme, so the head of housing and communities had asked for this piece of work. This was an additional piece of work for us last year, and it was because of that. It was because it was something new. The fact that there were a lot more bigger schemes coming into play this year, it was more like a starting point for putting different controls in place. So yeah, the non-conformance issues that are listed there, you know, were probably a lot to do with the fact that it was a new scheme, and those things will be improved going forward. I think it is important to note that in the 12 that we were speaking about earlier, there were no issues found around segregation of duties, so how they were assessed, how they were authorised, and how they were paid. So I think that's a good point to say going forward. In terms of the next part of your question about how we're going to look at that going forward and how these actions are progressed, there were quite early implementation dates. Some of them are around writing guidance, rewriting guidance, changing bits and pieces for the wider picture, I think. And there's been ongoing review of that. There's, you know, the work that we do for this committee around recommendations and trying to make sure that recommendations are implemented. That's already been happening in this case, and there's been quite a good overview within the service to look at that and to make sure that things are moving on, and that the things that have been said in the recommendations are actually happening, they have been implemented. And I can back that up because we're actually involved with the service on other schemes and having an involvement. It's almost like advice, guidance type thing of how we go into the new processes and what we can use from this one. So it's been quite, although it's there as a limited assurance, it has been quite a positive experience.
Thanks, Isabel. I saw Stewart with his hand up.
Thanks, Convener. I think just to support the comments that Isabel's made here. So we asked for this piece of work to be done by internal audit as a lessons learned exercise for us, and the work internal audit have done has been really helpful in informing how we're going to go about applying the food fund going forward. Worthwhile bearing in mind that if we look back, we thought that the application of a food fund was going to be something that was going to be time limited to something over the course of last summer. Then it became apparent that it was going to be something that was going to extend beyond then. So it's important for us to make sure that we had some robust processes in place. Just to confirm Isabel's point that of the recommendations that were made, about half were implemented as good as immediately, and the other half will be implemented by the time our new food fund applications go out. A number of the non-conformances, so for example, one of the applications that came in was for £1,050. Our limit is £1,000, so we decided to fund that application in full rather than to fund 1,000 out of the 1,050. So I suppose that we've learned a wee bit just in terms of the restrictions that we put ourselves in the initial guidance, and just tried to kind of build ourselves a wee bit of leeway in that as we move forward, so that we're not as bureaucratic as perhaps our initial restrictions set out. So maybe just to give you a flavour of the type of things that come up as non-conformance, but we can learn from and adapt and be more flexible on.
Alan, I see you've got a hand up. Is that a legacy, or are you?
Sorry, Convener, that's a legacy hand. I'll take it down just now.
Thanks. Now, Members have any further questions on this item? Appear to be none, so we move on to agenda item 5, the corporate risk management update. And Stewart,
Sorry,
you...
my hand up.
So, oh, Robert, sorry. Back to previous item.
Hi.
You've frozen, Robert. Try turning off your video and see if we can get sound. So we're not hearing you, Robert. Could you try switching off your video and speak to us again? No. No. We can't help you from this end, Robert.
Could you give us some?
No. Robert, can you hear us? Councillor Spears, can you hear us? Yeah. Sorry, we didn't catch the question. Would you be able to turn your video off and repeat the question? Because I don't think any of us could hear it. Frozen. Yeah. I'm sorry, it looks as if Councillor Spears is frozen. I think we should, unfortunately, we can maybe come back to that if Robert gets back in, but I think we should move on to agenda item 5 now, the corporate risk management update.
Sorry, I didn't catch anything.
Is it Brian?
Yes, convener, I'll pick this.
Okay. So just take Brian. Yep. Okay, Brian, thank you. Yes, please.
Thanks, convener. So this is one of the regular updates that come to Audit Committee on risk. You can see in para 4.1, it sets out the respective responsibility of the Audit Committee relative to the executive. There are 4 appendices, unfortunately quite detailed appendices attached to the report that go into some detail on the position. So the first one is the Corporate Risk Improvement Plan, Appendix 2. And you can see in the paragraph there examples of where progress has been made, and indeed the policy and guidance referred to there in the second line is the next item on the agenda. Members will be familiar with the suite of deep dive reviews that are now being progressed, and there is mention towards the tail end of that paragraph of ongoing work relating to improving the capture of risk in committee reports, notwithstanding there's already a heading for it. I think the work is more geared to what's captured under that heading, and that's something that's live and being progressed with governance. We then move on per para 4.3 to the dashboards, and again the detail is set out Appendix 3. The paragraph draws the committee's attention to a number of areas where it's categorised as limited assurance. And again, the detail sitting behind that sits within the appendix. And the final element is Appendix 4, the actual corporate risk register, setting out details of high risks. So you'll see, just jumping back to the recommendations, that they are aligned with those four recommendations, sorry, those four appendices, and with the reference on to executive hereafter. I'll try and address any questions or clarifications that the committee may have, convener. Thanks.
Thank you, Brian. I'll open this up to members. Any questions? Right, Councillor Black, Alison.
I've just got two questions. One was on page 31 about equalities, and I just, obviously we've got quite a robust equalities policy, but I know, and I brought this up at different forums, but I know personally people from ethnic minority backgrounds who haven't managed to get an interview for the council, and I just think when we've got such a crisis in care, for example, and a shortage of staff, that maybe we need to make sure that the policies that we've got in place are definitely being administered, in the strongest possible way, so that because our actual workforce doesn't reflect the diversity of our population in the area. So I think that's something we need to be really striving for. And the second comment was in page either 13 or 33 about health, safety and wellbeing of the staff. And it was just to say that I think that obviously the council's under a lot of pressure. It's been under significant pressure for several years now with cuts to budgets, etc. And like we have staff that are that have been promoted, and we have staff that are under increasing pressure. I think that there's more and more being put on them. There's departments have been divvied up for loads of different reasons and put out amongst other other services. And I just think that sometimes I know that some of the senior staff, there's been higher sickness rates, and I think that reflects the difficulties that staff are experiencing. I think sometimes, because of where we are as a council, we're a middle-sized council, we sometimes find it difficult to recruit, and we've got great staff, but sometimes we might be promoting staff before they're ready. And I think we've just got to make sure that we think about staff's welfare and well-being, as well as making sure that we deliver the services.
Thanks, Alison. Ken, I don't know whether, Kenneth, you want to respond to Councillor Black's comments.
Yeah, thank you, convener. I suppose to start on the issue of well-being, I think this is a concern for all of us, and Councillor Black is right to observe the increasing challenges that staff are under. I think that was the case in advance of COVID, and I think COVID has made it more challenging for many of our colleagues because of the changes and the pressures that has brought. I mean, as Chief Executive, I chair the wellbeing group that involves representatives of staff across the organisation and union colleagues as well. We have very open and I think important discussions about how we can best support staff through the current period. And as members will know, in some areas of service, perhaps most notably the Health and Social Care Partnership, we really are still in full response mode to COVID. Matters really haven't let up for a period of 18 months or so. But I think the important thing about the organisation, the culture we're trying to create, is that kind of openness and responsiveness to the concerns that staff bring forward. And through the wellbeing group and a host of other issues being taken forward through colleagues in HR and elsewhere. I think we are trying to address that. So we certainly recognise the importance of it and the importance of continuing to work on that. Just in relation to equality, I think it's a really important point that Councillor Black makes. There was an internal audit report done in relation to our approach to equalities. I think that was in 2019. It reported. We've subsequently had a report into the corporate management team, which set out our responses to that. I think we've got quite a lot of work to do in this area. We do now have a plan for that. It does include issues round about recruitment and ensuring that we are more representative of the communities that we serve, and that doesn't just relate to Black and minority ethnic communities, actually relates to the disabled community as well and others. So I think on equalities, whilst there's been that very good report that came through internal audit, there's been an action plan developed on the back of that, which has been approved through corporate management team. But I do think there's a need to up our game, and we're focused on that and the need to do that. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you, Kenneth. For the questions, comments, Cecil, yep, Councillor McAdorn, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Convener. I've got a number of questions, but I'll give you them all, and then we'll let the services answer in turn. Just touching on a wee bit of what Alison was raising there around equalities, I just wanted to ask a wee bit more around where we are with our mental health services within schools, because while our staff are under enormous pressure, so are our young people. And I know that we had managers recruiting there, but it's about when we're going to have that programme in place, as particularly as the next round of the most acute phases of education are going coming on as we reach the end of the year for our young people, and the anticipated anxiety around what's going to happen from Education Scotland, the SQA, etc. I think we'll have an overlay, particularly around exams. On equalities itself, I wonder when we've last looked at equalities and the risks around that, and that it feels as if the equalities are becoming greater as a result of the pandemic, and therefore is there a need to look to adjust our mitigation of that, and therefore where our resources are best directed. And not unrelated to that is our budget position, and whether or not we should be looking to escalate that from medium to high, just because of the risks that are around at the moment on that. And finally, it's when we last reviewed our risk appetite, was that pre-COVID? Should we look to do it fairly soon in the recovery phase of COVID, to see if there's something that we can do in there that gives us greater assurance about our direction of travel. But I hope that wasn't too garbled, Convener, and made sense, and I'll await the answers from the two officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecil. A number of very good points there. I wonder who's going to come in first to pick up on these. I see Gary Greenhorn. Gary, thanks. Yep.
Thank you, Convener. In terms of the first question that the leader posed in terms of supporting children mental health in schools, that the schools, the secondary schools and the clusters have had devolved money put out to them to support the recruitment of counsellors in schools to support that. There's other monies that are planned, as you know, that the Scottish Government are currently reviewing the whole Scottish Attainment Challenge, devolving of funds, which includes the Pupil Equity Fund, or PEF as it's commonly known, and we're expecting further information on how they're going to devolve that in terms of to local authority weeks. we do expect some of that money will be targeted at supporting additional mental health needs of children and young people that are in our school settings. But just to reassure the leader that all the devolved monies we've already got from the government are passed out to schools so they can recruit their counsellors just now in the secondary schools. But hopefully there'll be more money flowing from that in the weeks and months ahead. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gary. Stewart, thank you.
Thank you, Convener. I'll maybe try and pick up on the questions that the leader asked in relation to equalities. As part of our workforce plan that was considered in the business plan in May at Council by members, with an equalities section included in there, that picked up on a number of the points that Councillor Black raised, and set out a number of actions that the council was planning to take. Kenneth referenced a report to corporate management team on equalities. There's a equalities working groups being established, and that's working its way through to produce the next report for us on equalities. I just need to double check where that report is intended for, whether that's for the executive or scrutiny, but there is a report in the pipeline which will come to elected members on equality matters. I don't know whether Brian maybe wants to pick up on the issue of risk appetite and when that was last considered.
Convener,
Yes,
if I
thank
come in
you.
on the back of that, yeah, there's maybe
Absolutely,
2 points. Two points, particularly pertaining to me in the questions the leaders posed. On risk appetite, coincidentally, last Thursday we had one of the periodic meetings of the Corporate Risk Management Working Group, and this item was formally on the agenda for discussion, and that's a recognition, just as the leader suggests, that we do need to review, revisit how that's profiled. And I think there's a recognised training dimension to that, to explore in more depth what we actually mean by risk appetite. So I think there's quite a fertile agenda there that is very much on the radar, and which we will move to forward. On the question of financial sustainability, there is a valid question as to whether the existing categorisation of medium might be changed to high. You'll see in the relevant page 32 that, as with all of them in this section, this appendix 4, most are initially categorised as high, but in the little, the top right hand of each of the templates, there's a revised assessment after the application or implementation of remedial action, which for most of them takes them down to medium. And I think sitting behind that is, in the case of financial sustainability, the recognition that the council will do whatever is necessary to secure financial sustainability and meet its statutory requirement to deliver a balanced budget. So it's a relevant question, and I think the answer as to whether that moves from its existing medium to high is whether that's underpinned by a questioning of the capacity of the council to achieve and deliver on financial sustainability. And I think that's almost inherently a discussion and a debate that we'll see emerge during the forthcoming process of the budget. We have the next meeting, I think it's the 8th of October, of the member budget working group. And then later that month, we'll have a budget update report going to executive. So these are good platforms for that question to be explored. I'll stop there, convener.
Thank you. Cecil, do you wish to come back on anything there, or are you happy with the response?
No, I'm content with that, and as long as members are kept updated, I think that's important.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you. Any other member wish to come in? Alan, Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, Nigel. Just on the back of what's already been said, and Gary highlighted in relation to the mental health issues, I'm just wondering if it would be possible to get a breakdown per school regarding the number of mental health issues that have been highlighted and taken forward and dealt with. Obviously, the last nearly 2 years we've been dealing with COVID, so it'd be interesting to try and benchmark the problems. So if we could get information possibly in relation to the last 5 years, so we know what it was like pre-COVID and what we're actually dealing with now, I think that would be helpful.
Gary, are you able to pick up on that, Gary Greenhorn?
Sorry, convener, my connection went down there just as Councillor Nimmo was asking the question. But I'm happy to give Councillor Nimmo a phone after it to provide the information if need be. Otherwise, if you could repeat the question, I'll see what I can answer just now. Sorry, I had the whirly wheel was on my screen there. I do apologise.
Councillor Nimmo was asking for a breakdown per school of number of pupils with mental health issues. Is that correct, Alan?
Yeah, that's correct, Nigel.
Okay. To be honest with you, I'm not sure if we would have that analysis of breakdown available, but I'm happy to take it offline and do some investigative work and give Councillor Nimmo a response as best we can on that, convener. That's not a problem.
Convener, I'll speak to Gary separately and take it up with him direct. That's fine.
Okay.
Just further to that, certainly by all means, it'd be helpful for the committee to get a briefing note on the outcome of that.
Okay, I'll arrange that, convener. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody, any other member wish to come in at this stage? See any hands? I've just a question on page appendix 3, page 27. Why have no services given us any assurance that they've implemented the necessary effective climate change plans corporately, given the importance that we attach to it? I don't know. Kenneth?
Perhaps if I can come in initially, convener, and
yes,
others may want to come in behind me.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I think it's just a reflection of the challenges, the inherent challenges in delivering on this agenda. Members may recall, and I'm sure will recall, the last budget round, in particular budget meeting, and in particular with respect to the capital programme, the discussion around the provision that could be afforded and built into the programme to deal with the climate issue. But I know there's a active corporate group which all services are represented on, and a lot of work's been done to take forward this agenda. In fact, one illustration of that after this meeting, I have a meeting with a colleague to talk about carbon budgeting. So there's a lot happening, but I think there needs to be more tangible action before we can give a more, how shall I put it, more accommodating assessment. But as I say, others may wish to come in behind that. And I see Douglas Duff on the call. I'm sure Douglas would be well placed to supplement what I've said, convener. Thanks.
Happy to do that, convener, and just picking up on Brian's explanation there.
Thank you.
I'm happy to come in on that. And just to say that there was a report to the executive in June, which gave an update on the work that was taking place in regard to the climate emergency, and attached an initial action plan on climate change, which noted a number of actions taking place, including the carbon literacy training that's taking place involving elected members and officers from across the council. All of this with a view to preparing a more detailed action plan that is intended to be prepared as the next phase of activity. And I think that just denotes the scale of work that's required around this, as Brian has mentioned earlier there. And so it is very, being taken very seriously by services, but it does take some time to pull together.
Thank you, Douglas. Okay. Do we have any other questions or comments on this report? If there are none, are the committee agreed to, having reviewed the Appendix 1, 2, 3 and 4, we're happy to report, refer this report to the executive for review and approval? Yeah, I see Alison nodding. We're all agreed? We are agreed. Yeah. I wonder, before we move to the last item, I'm conscious that Robert had a point to make on the previous agenda item. Robert, are you with us? Do you wish to make a comment?
No, can you hear me okay?
We can now, yes.
I've changed the connections, so I wasn't picking up on what you said. I was just asking for examples regarding the funding for out of school and school holiday provision to voluntary organisations that are trying to provide meals and various other stuff for children.
Okay. Did we pick up on that? Just for clarity, we in order to accommodate Councillor Spears' question, we've returned to agenda item 4 and specifically relating to page 16 and the school holiday food fund grants. I don't know whether anybody wants to pick up on Robert's question. Stewart, thank you.
Thanks. So if I'm understanding Councillor Spears correctly, you're just looking for some examples of organisations that were paid from this?
No, you said there was non-compliance. I was looking for the examples of the non-compliance.
Okay. So, yeah, I understand. So one of the areas of non-compliance was that we originally said that the upper limit of contributions that we were going to make was going to be £1,000, and we got an application in for funding for £1,050. So we made the contribution of £1,050 to make sure that the application was fully funded. So there's, one example of non-compliance, but we can probably box ourselves in a wee bit by putting a specific amount on how much we would fund as an upper limit. Maybe another example is that an organisation applied for funding for more than one school holiday period, and the aggregate of the funding that we gave them for more than one holiday period was over £1,000. So these are maybe just a couple of examples of kind of non-compliance from the framework that we had in place last year.
Thank you, Stuart. Robert, you happy with that?
Yes, sure. Maybe in future we can give the organisations, the volunteers, more help with their supplies. We discussed at another meeting about volunteer fatigue, and form filling is one of the main causes of fatigue. I know we had a very successful one here in Grangemouth where we worked with the local churches who came in and helped, and it seemed to go down very, very well and very much appreciated, not just by local children, but especially their parents. I owe them a debt of thanks, and any help we can give to these organisations and volunteers would be greatly appreciated.
Okay. Thank you. Let's just thank the committee for their forbearance, allowing us to return to that item. And just to conclude that, recommend that we note the progress being made with completing the internal audit plan for 2021-22, the outcome of the finalised 2020-21 assignments. Thank you. So now move to the final item on the agenda, which is item 6, the risk management assurance policy and framework. Stewart, is that yourself who's introducing that?
Convener, I'll pick this up with your agreement.
Sorry, Brian. Right, thank you.
Thanks. So this fulfills a commitment in the work plan to update the policy and supporting framework document that sits behind it. This was last agreed several years ago, back in May 2018. So this piece of work's now concluded. You'll see per para 3.2 that in undertaking the work, a wide range of external sources were referenced in terms of endeavouring to make sure we captured best practice. Notwithstanding that, the changes to the policy are somewhat limited, as you can see in section 4, and I guess we could draw some comfort from the fact that there hasn't been the need to make major surgery to what we had already had in practice. So paras 4.1, 4.2 outline the areas where there have been some changes, but as I say, these are not substantive, and I think more reflect a tidying up of the document. Para 4.4 notes the training dimension to the work plan as well, and embedded within the policy. So similar to the previous report, Convener, in addition to the policy itself, which is attached, there is a reference on to the executive for approval thereafter. I'm happy to try and address any questions that the committee may have in the document. Thanks.
Thank you, Brian. Are there any questions or comments from members? Oh, sorry, I see the hand now. Councillor Meikle-John, Cecil, thank you.
Thank you, Convener. It's just a very brief comment, and in the scheme of things, it's probably something that's quite small. It'd been helpful just to have had in the covering report just what the changes were, or even track changes within the policy, just so that members' eyes were drawn to where the change was, rather than having to wait to come to the committee. I appreciate it's not a huge change in this case, but I just think it would give members the opportunity to have some thoughts about it, and perhaps look at the implications of that change a wee bit better for scrutiny.
Brian, would you like to respond to the comment?
I think we just have to acknowledge that's a fair comment, Convener. What we could do, and indeed will do, is circulate a version of the document that has the change sections highlighted. So the point the leader has made can be addressed, albeit slightly belatedly.
That would be helpful. Thank you, Brian. Are there any further questions or comments? If not, we've considered part 1 and part 2 of the documents. We're happy to refer this to the executive for approval.
Agreed.
I'd agree. That's fine. That concludes the meeting, and can I thank you all for attending and for your valuable contributions to the discussion. And enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you all. Thank you.